the divorce hearing, I asked for nothing except his mother. Courtroom fell dead silent. The judge's gavel froze midair. My soon-to-be ex-husband's face drained of all color. But it was Vivian Hartwell's expression that I'll remember forever, the way her perfectly painted lips twisted from smug satisfaction into pure, unadulterated terror. Let me back up. My name is Elena Hartwell, though soon it'll be Elena Morrison again. I'm 34 years old, and for the past 8 years I thought I was living a fairy tale. I met Daniel Hartwell at a charity gala in Seattle. I was a junior curator at a small art gallery, overwhelmed by the crowd of wealthy donors. He was a cardiovascular surgeon, confident and charming, with dark hair that was just starting to gray at the temples. He approached me while I stood alone by a Monet reproduction, nursing a glass of cheap champagne. "You look like you'd rather be anywhere else," he said, his smile warm and genuine. "Is it that obvious?" I laughed nervously. "Only to someone who feels the same way." He extended his hand. "Daniel Hartwell. That was the beginning." He pursued me relentlessly, flowers delivered to the gallery, handwritten notes tucked into my coat pockets, surprise picnics at Discovery Park. 6 months later, we were engaged. My parents, simple people who ran a bookstore in Spokane, cried with joy at the wedding. They thought their daughter had won the lottery. The first time I met Vivian, Daniel's mother, was 2 weeks before the wedding. She lived in a massive Tudor-style mansion in Laurelhurst overlooking Lake Washington. The house smelled of expensive perfume and old money. Vivian was elegant, her silver hair styled perfectly, wearing a Chanel suit that probably cost more than my car. "Elena, darling." She took both my hands, her grip surprisingly strong. "Welcome to the family. Daniel speaks so highly of you." Her eyes, though, told a different story. They scanned me from head to toe, cataloging every flaw, every sign that I didn't belong in her world. "Thank you, Mrs. Hartwell. I'm honored to. Call me Vivian, dear. We're going to be so close." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Now, we have much to discuss about the wedding. I've taken the liberty of contacting a few vendors." That should have been my first warning. Over the next 2 weeks, Vivian systematically dismantled every wedding plan I'd made. My choice of flowers? Too provincial. My menu? Not sophisticated enough. My guest list? She cut half of them, including several of my college friends. "Trust me, darling," she'd say with that patronizing smile. "I know what's best for the Hartwell family." Daniel always sided with his mother. "She just wants everything to be perfect, Elena. She's been planning my wedding since I was born." He'd laugh, as if that were charming rather than disturbing. The wedding was beautiful in a cold, sterile way. Everything was perfect, expensive, impressive. But looking at the photos now, I can see the truth. I'm smiling, but my eyes are hollow. I'd already begun to disappear. Married life was nothing like I'd imagined. We moved into a stunning Craftsman in Queen and that Vivian had purchased for us. "My wedding gift," she announced. Daniel worked brutal hours at Swedish Medical Center, often staying overnight. I understood. He was saving lives. I was proud of him. But Vivian... God, Vivian was everywhere. She had a key to our house. She'd show up unannounced, rearranging my furniture, criticizing my cooking, commenting on my weight. "Daniel's father preferred women who took care of themselves," she'd say, eyeing my comfortable jeans and sweater. "You represent the Hartwell name now, Elena. Appearance matters." I tried to talk to Daniel about boundaries. "She's just lonely," he'd say, barely looking up from his medical journals. "Dad died 5 years ago. Let her feel needed." So I swallowed my discomfort. I let Vivian redecorate my home. I wore the clothes she approved of. I attended her insufferable charity luncheons, smiling until my face hurt, listening to her friends discuss their European vacations and their children's accomplishments while I faded into the expensive wallpaper. The worst part? Daniel and I barely existed as a couple anymore. We hadn't had a real conversation in months. We hadn't been intimate in nearly a year. We were roommates in an expensive house, performing the role of a perfect marriage for an audience that didn't actually care. Then came that Thursday afternoon that shattered everything. I'd left work early with a migraine. The gallery was quiet, and my assistant insisted I go home and rest. I drove through the rain, Seattle's perpetual gray sky matching my mood perfectly. Our house was supposed to be empty. Daniel was scheduled for back-to-back surgeries, but his Mercedes was in the driveway. Relief flooded through me. Maybe he'd come home early too. Maybe we could actually talk, reconnect, remember why we'd fallen in love. I walked through the front door quietly, not wanting to wake him if he was napping. That's when I heard it. Laughter. A woman's laughter, light and intimate, coming from upstairs. And Daniel's voice, warm in a way I hadn't heard in years. My legs moved on autopilot, carrying me up the stairs. The bedroom door was ajar. Through the crack I saw them. Daniel and a woman with glossy dark hair, still wearing scrubs, tangled in our sheets. Our sheets. I must have made a sound because Daniel's head snapped toward the door. His face cycled through shock, guilt, and finally something worse, resignation. It's not horror that I'd caught him. Resignation that he'd have to deal with this inconvenience. Elena. He sat up slowly, making no move to cover himself. This isn't. Don't. My voice sounded distant, like it belonged to someone else. Don't insult me by saying it isn't what it looks like. The woman, I'd later learn her name was Dr. Sophia Chen, a colleague from the hospital, at least had the decency to look uncomfortable. She grabbed her clothes and fled past me, murmuring an apology I didn't acknowledge. Daniel stood, pulling on his pants with infuriating casualness. We need to talk. Now you want talk? I heard myself laugh, a bitter sound. How long? Does it matter? How long? He sighed, running a hand through his hair. 3 years. 3 years. While I'd been playing the dutiful wife, attending Vivian's parties, managing his household, he'd been with her. 3 years of lies, of him coming home late smelling of hospital antiseptic when he'd really been with her. I want a divorce, I said, surprised by how steady my voice was. Probably for the best. He actually looked relieved. You were never really suited for this life, Elena. Mother always said. Your mother knew? The room tilted. Daniel had the grace to look away. Yes. She knew. Course she did. Course Vivian, who controlled every aspect of Daniel's life, knew about his affair. Maybe she'd even encouraged it. The thought made my stomach turn. Get out, I whispered. Get out of this house right now. He left. I stood in that bedroom, in the house that never felt like mine, surrounded by furniture Vivian had chosen, wearing clothes she'd approved, and felt something inside me crack wide open. Not heartbreak, I'd stopped loving Daniel months ago, I realized. What cracked open was rage. That night, while Daniel stayed God knows where, I did something I hadn't done in years. I called my best friend from college, Rebecca, who I'd lost touch with because she wasn't appropriate for the Hartwell social circle. Elena. Her voice was shocked. My God, it's been forever. Are you okay? I told her everything. She listened, and when I finished, she said 7 words that changed everything. You need to hire Frank Morrison immediately. Frank Morrison was a divorce attorney with a reputation for being ruthless and thorough. He was also Rebecca's uncle. The next morning, I sat in Frank's downtown office, a modest space that smelled of coffee and old books, nothing like the sterile perfection of the Hartwell world. Frank was in his 60s, gray-haired and sharp-eyed. Mrs. Hartwell, he said, studying the notes I'd brought. I'm going to be blunt. Cases like this, you're entitled to half of everything acquired during the marriage. However, I see from these documents that almost everything is in your mother-in-law's name. She bought our house. She has her name on Daniel's investment accounts. She She's protected her son's assets. Frank nodded grimly. It's common with wealthy families. But here's what we're going to do. I want you to gather every document you can find. Every piece of paper in that house. Bank statements, property deeds, medical records, old photos, everything. Why would old photos matter? His smile was wolfish. You'd be surprised what people hide in plain sight. For the next 2 weeks, while Daniel avoided me and Vivian called daily with thinly veiled threats about making this difficult, I searched. I went through every drawer, every closet, every box in the basement. I found Daniel's financial records, or rather, Vivian's control over his finances. Every paycheck deposited into accounts she managed. Investment portfolios in her name using his money. Then, in a dusty box in the attic labeled D's Baby Things, I found something that made my hands shake. A manila folder tucked beneath yellowed baby clothes. Inside were documents that didn't make sense. A birth certificate for Daniel Christopher Hartwell, dated November 15, 1985, in Portland, Oregon. But the parents listed were Vivian Hartwell and Richard Hartwell, her deceased husband. I pulled out my phone and searched. Found Daniel's real birth certificate, the one he'd used for our marriage license. It listed the same parents but was issued in Seattle, Washington on November 18, 1985, 3 days later, different city. My heart raced as I dug deeper. Found a newspaper clipping from Portland dated November 1985. Local couple seeks missing infant son. The photo showed a young couple, devastated, holding a picture of a newborn. The baby had a distinctive birthmark on his left shoulder, the same strawberry-colored mark Daniel had. There were more documents. A name change filing. Medical records showing a different blood type than what Daniel had told me. And at the bottom of the box, a court order from 15 years ago, a restraining order against Vivian Hartwell, issued in Portland for harassment and stalking related to adoption dispute. I photographed everything with trembling hands and called Frank Morrison immediately. "Come to my office now," he said after I explained what I'd found. "Don't tell anyone. Don't leave those documents in the house." In Frank's office, we laid out everything. He called in a colleague, a woman named Sarah Chen who specialized in adoption law and fraud cases. "This is..." Sarah's eyes widened as she examined the documents. "Mrs. Hartwell, if this is what I think it is, your mother-in-law didn't just adopt your husband. She stole him." The story that emerged was horrifying. In 1985, Vivian and Richard Hartwell had been trying to adopt through official channels but kept getting rejected. Something about Richard's gambling debts and Vivian's psychological evaluation raising red flags. Then Vivian, working as a nurse at a Portland hospital, had encountered a young, struggling couple with a newborn. There were gaps in the hospital records, suspiciously missing paperwork, but the timeline suggested Vivian had convinced them to give up their baby, forged documents, and fled to Seattle. The couple reported their son missing days later, but with no evidence of foul play and no leads, the case went cold. They'd spent decades searching, according to follow-up articles I found online. They were still alive, still hoping. "There's more," Frank said, spreading out financial documents. "Your mother-in-law has been systematically draining funds from your husband's father's estate. Richard Hartwell died with a trust fund worth approximately $12 million designated for Daniel. Vivian, as trustee, was supposed to manage it until Daniel turned 35. He's 36 now. That money should have been transferred to him last year. Where is it?" I asked. "Hidden in offshore accounts, shell corporations, and her name," Sarah said. "She's been committing financial fraud for over a decade, keeping Daniel dependent on her." I thought about Daniel, brilliant and talented, always deferring to his mother on financial matters. "She needs me," he'd say. He never knew he had millions that were rightfully his. He worked brutal hours while Vivian lived in luxury on his inheritance. "What do we do?" I asked. Frank and Sarah exchanged a look. "We have enough evidence to bring criminal charges," Sarah said. "But it's your call. This will destroy your husband's life as he knows it." I thought about Daniel, who'd cheated on me for 3 years, who'd dismissed me, belittled me, let his mother control our marriage. But I also thought about the baby who'd been stolen from his real parents, the man who'd been robbed of his true identity and his inheritance. "We do it," I said. "All of it." The divorce hearing was scheduled for a Wednesday morning. Daniel's lawyer, an expensive shark named Gregory Wells, had already sent over their proposed settlement. I'd get the car, which was in my name, and $50,000 for my trouble. Everything else was technically Vivian's property, so not subject to division. That morning, I dressed carefully in a navy suit Rebecca had helped me pick out. Simple, professional, strong. I met Frank outside the courthouse. "Are you ready?" he asked. "Once we do this, there's no taking it back." "I'm ready." Courtroom was cold and formal, all wood paneling and harsh fluorescent lights. Daniel sat with Gregory Wells, looking confident. Vivian sat in the gallery, already smiling her triumphant smile. She'd won, she thought. She'd gotten rid of the unsuitable daughter-in-law and protected her son's assets. Judge Patricia Morrison, no relation to Frank, called the proceedings to order. She was a severe-looking woman in her 50s with sharp eyes that missed nothing. Gregory Wells stood. "Your Honor, this should be a straightforward proceeding. My client and Mrs. Hartwell have been married 8 years. There are no children, no significant shared assets. Mr. Hartwell has generously offered his wife $50,000 and her vehicle as a settlement." "Generous," I muttered. Frank squeezed my hand. Judge Morrison looked at me. "Mrs. Hartwell, do you have counsel?" "Yes, Your Honor." Frank stood. Frank Morrison representing the petitioner. "And what does your client seek in this divorce?" This was it. The moment everything changed. Frank nodded at me. I stood, my heart pounding so hard I thought everyone must hear it. "Your Honor," my voice was steady, stronger than I felt. "I don't want the $50,000. I don't want the car. I don't want any of the material possessions." Daniel's eyebrows rose. Vivian's smile widened. She thought I was being noble, stupid. "I want only one thing from this marriage," I continued. "Custody of one person." I turned and looked directly at Vivian. "His mother." Courtroom exploded into whispers. Judge Morrison banged her gavel. "Order." "Counselor, what is the meaning of this?" Frank stepped forward, holding a thick folder. "Your Honor, we'd like to present evidence of multiple criminal activities committed by Mrs. Vivian Hartwell that directly impact this divorce proceeding and the assets involved." Gregory Wells shot to his feet. "Objection. This is highly irregular. Mrs. Vivian Hartwell is not party to—" "Actually," Frank interrupted smoothly, "since nearly all assets in question are in Mrs. Vivian Hartwell's name, and since the evidence we have suggests those assets were obtained through fraud and rightfully belong to Daniel Hartwell, she is very much party to these proceedings." Judge Morrison's eyes narrowed. "Approach." Frank and Gregory went to the bench. I watched Daniel's face cycle through confusion, annoyance, and the first flicker of concern. Vivian sat rigid, her smile frozen. After a whispered conversation, Judge Morrison looked up. "I'm going to allow this. Bailiff, please escort Mrs. Vivian Hartwell to the witness stand." "This is absurd." Vivian's voice was shrill. "I'm not on trial here. I'm simply—" "Mrs. Hartwell, you will approach the stand, or I will hold you in contempt." Judge Morrison's voice was ice. Vivian walked to the stand, her designer heels clicking against the floor. Her hands trembled as she was sworn in, but she lifted her chin defiantly. Frank approached her like a predator. "Mrs. Hartwell, you are Daniel Hartwell's biological mother, correct?" "Of course I am." "And he was born in Seattle on November 15th, 1985? "Yes." But her eyes flickered. Frank produced the Portland birth certificate. "Then why does this birth certificate, filed in Portland, Oregon, list the birth date as November 15th, but show it was issued 3 days later?" And why does it have a different serial number than the one registered in Seattle? Vivian's face went white. We moved. The paperwork was corrected. Corrected? Frank's voice was sharp. Or forged? He pulled out the newspaper clipping. Do you recognize this couple? Vivian looked at the photo of the devastated young parents. Her composure cracked. No. Your Honor, I'd like to submit into evidence hospital records from St. Michael's Hospital in Portland from November 1985, showing that Vivian Hartwell, then a registered nurse, was working the maternity ward when an infant matching Daniel Hartwell's description was reported missing. Frank placed document after document before the judge. Birth records showing a baby boy born to Jennifer and Michael Torres on November 15th, with a distinctive strawberry birthmark on the left shoulder, the same birthmark Daniel Hartwell has. And finally, this restraining order from 15 years ago, issued against Vivian Hartwell after she made contact with the Torres family, claiming she had information about their missing son. Courtroom was dead silent. Daniel had gone gray, his hands gripping the table. This is ridiculous, Vivian stammered. I adopted him legally. I have all the papers. Papers you forged, Frank said coldly. We've had them analyzed. They're fake. You didn't adopt Daniel Hartwell. You stole him from his biological parents and created a false identity. Daniel, Vivian turned to her son, tears streaming down her face. Don't listen to this. I'm your mother. I raised you. I loved you. Daniel stared at her, his world crumbling. Is it true? His voice was barely a whisper. Mother, is any of this true? She opened her mouth, closed it. And in that silence, he had his answer. There's more, Your Honor, Frank continued. He produced the financial documents. Vivian Hartwell has also been committing financial fraud against her son. Richard Hartwell, her deceased husband, left a trust fund worth $12 million for Daniel, to be transferred to him at age 35. Daniel turned 36 last year. Mrs. Hartwell, as trustee, has hidden these funds in offshore accounts and shell corporations, keeping her son dependent on her while living off his inheritance. Judge Morrison looked at the documents, her expression growing darker. These are serious allegations, Counselor. We have bank records, transfer documents, and statements from 3 forensic accountants. The evidence is irrefutable. The judge turned to Vivian. Mrs. Hartwell, do you have representation? Vivian was trembling now, her perfect facade shattered. I need to call my lawyer. Bailiff, Judge Morrison said quietly, please detain Mrs. Hartwell. I'm issuing a warrant for her arrest on charges of identity fraud, kidnapping, and financial fraud. This proceeding is suspended pending criminal investigation. She looked at Daniel, her expression softening slightly. Mr. Hartwell, I strongly suggest you contact the Torres family through proper legal channels. And I recommend you secure independent legal counsel regarding your father's estate. 2 bailiffs approached Vivian. She stood, her legs shaking, and looked at Daniel one last time. I did it all for you, she whispered. Everything I did was to give you a good life. Daniel just stared at her, broken. As they led Vivian away in handcuffs, she turned to me with pure venom in her eyes. You destroyed my family. No, I said quietly. You did that 36 years ago. Courtroom slowly cleared. Daniel sat alone at his table, his lawyer whispering urgently in his ear. I gathered my things, ready to leave this chapter of my life behind. Elena. Daniel's voice stopped me. He walked over, moving like an old man. Did you know? When you married me, did you know? No, I said honestly. I found out 2 weeks ago. Why? His eyes were red. Why tell everyone? Why not just take your settlement and go? I looked at this man I'd once loved, who'd become a stranger long before I discovered his affair. Because you deserve to know the truth. Because somewhere there are 2 people who've spent 36 years wondering what happened to their son. And because she needed to pay for what she did to them, to you, and to me. He nodded slowly. I don't even know who I am. That's something you'll have to figure out. I picked up my bag. Goodbye, Daniel. I walked out of that courthouse into the Seattle rain, Frank beside me. You know, he said, in 40 years of practicing law, I've never seen anything quite like that. What happens now? Criminal trial for Vivian. She's looking at 15 to 20 years minimum. The estate will be unfrozen and transferred to Daniel. And the Torres family. He smiled slightly. They've been notified. They won't meet him. 6 months later, I sat in my new apartment in Capitol Hill, smaller than the Queen and House but actually mine, and read the newspaper article. Local surgeon reunited with biological family after 36 years. There was a photo of Daniel with an older couple who had his eyes, his smile. Torres family. They were crying, all of them. The article detailed Vivian's trial. She'd been sentenced to 15 years for kidnapping, fraud, and financial crimes. Torres family chose not to pursue maximum charges, showing more grace than I could have managed. Daniel had established a relationship with them, though the article noted he still struggled with his identity. Sophia Chen, his mistress, had left him when the scandal broke. Apparently, she'd been interested in the successful surgeon with money and connections, not the broken man trying to piece together his life. I felt nothing reading about his struggles. Not satisfaction, not pity. Just nothing. My phone buzzed. A text from Marcus Chen, Sarah's brother, whom I'd met during the case preparation. We'd been dating for 3 months, taking it slow, learning each other. Dinner tonight? I'm cooking. I smiled and texted back. Perfect. That evening, in Marcus's cozy Fremont bungalow that smelled of garlic and laughter, he pulled me close. You seem lighter, he said. Happier. I am. I realized it was true. For the first time in 8 years, I'm just me. I like her, he whispered, kissing my forehead. This you. The story spread through Seattle's social circles like wildfire. The Hartwell scandal. Some people called me vindictive. Others called me brave. I didn't care about either label. I'd done what needed to be done. A year after the divorce, I received a letter. Daniel's handwriting, familiar from years of grocery lists and notes on the fridge. Elena, I know I have no right to write to you, but I needed you to know I've started therapy. I'm meeting with my biological family regularly. Torres, my parents, are remarkable people. They never stopped looking for me. They never gave up hope. I understand now what Vivian did to all of us. How she controlled every aspect of my life, making me believe I needed her when really she needed me. Or rather, she needed the idea of me, her perfect, stolen son. I know you'll never forgive me for the affair, for the way I treated you, for choosing Vivian over you every single time. I don't deserve forgiveness. But I wanted you to know that you saved my life. By destroying it, you saved it. The inheritance has been returned to me. I've donated $2 million to organizations that help families of missing children. It's not enough, but it's something. I hope you're happy, Elena. I hope you found someone who sees you, really sees you, the way I never did. Sincerely, Daniel, though I'm learning that my birth name was actually David. I'm still figuring out who that person is. I read the letter twice, then filed it away. I didn't hate him anymore. I didn't feel anything for him, really, except a distant hope that he'd find peace. 2 years after the divorce, Marcus proposed during a weekend trip to the San Juan Islands. We were watching the sunset, and he simply turned to me and said, "Marry me." Not because I want to change you or control you or make you into someone else. Marry me because I love exactly who you are. I said yes. Our wedding was small, my parents, his sister Sarah, a few close friends. No expensive venues, no social obligations. Just love and laughter and joy. When I walked down the aisle in a simple dress I'd chosen myself, I cried. But this time they were real tears of happiness. I never saw Vivian again. She served her sentence in a women's correctional facility in Washington. I heard through the grapevine that she insisted, even in prison, that she'd done nothing wrong. That everything she did was out of love for her son. Some people, I suppose, can never face their own darkness. 5 years after that courtroom moment, I stood in my art gallery, my own gallery, which I'd opened with a small business loan and a lot of determination. It was a modest space in Pioneer Square, showcasing emerging artists, the kind of place I'd dreamed of running before I became Mrs. Hartwell and forgot how to dream. A young woman came in, looking nervous. "Are you Elena Morrison?" she asked. "I am." I read about what happened to you. Your case. My mother-in-law is..." She swallowed hard. "I think she's stealing from us. Controlling everything. And I don't know what to do." I sat down with her, made tea, and listened to her story. Then I gave her Frank Morrison's card. "Talk to him," I said. "And whatever you do, trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is." She thanked me, eyes shining with tears of relief. As she left, I realized this was my purpose now. Not just curating art, but helping women find their voices, their strength, their way out of situations that had nearly destroyed me. That evening, Marcus and I sat on our deck, watching the city lights. His hand found mine, our fingers intertwining naturally, comfortably. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked. "The way it all went down?" I thought about that courtroom, about Vivian's face when I said I wanted custody of her. About Daniel's shattered world. About the truth that had set so many people free and imprisoned others. "No," I said finally. "The only thing I regret is not seeing the truth sooner. Not trusting myself. Not standing up for myself earlier." "You were brave," Marcus said. "I was desperate," I corrected. "There's a difference. Sometimes they're the same thing." Maybe he was right. Maybe courage is just desperation with a plan. The last time I heard about Daniel, now going by David with his biological family, he'd left surgical practice and was teaching medicine at the University of Washington. He'd married someone, a teacher, someone quiet and kind. I hoped he'd learned how to be present, how to see the person he was with. I hoped he'd broken free from Vivian's ghost. As for me, I learned the most important lesson of my life in that courtroom. You don't have to accept the life someone else has designed for you. You don't have to live in their cage, eat their food, wear their clothes, speak their words. You can burn it all down and build something new from the ashes. When I asked for custody of his mother, I wasn't asking for revenge. I was asking for justice, for accountability, for the truth to matter more than appearances, more than money, more than the comfortable lies we tell ourselves. And in the end, the truth did matter. It set David free to find his real family. It sent Vivian to prison where she couldn't hurt anyone else. It ended a marriage that was already dead. And it gave me back myself. That's worth more than any settlement, any house in Queen Anne, any place in high society. I got back the one thing I'd lost in that marriage, me. Elena Morrison, with my simple tastes and my big dreams and my refusal to disappear just because someone else found me inconvenient. At the divorce hearing, I asked for nothing except his mother. And in taking her down, I got everything I actually needed, my freedom, my truth, and my life back. Courtroom fell silent that day. But I've been loud ever since.